Novak Djokovic is one of, if not the greatest tennis player of all time, with his most recent Grand Slam coming at Wimbledon 2022. Amidst all this success, however, he has found himself at the center of an ugly controversy. Stay tuned to hear the latest updates on the debate surrounding the tennis star and to find out the classy gesture he recently made. Don't go anywhere. If you haven't been following the controversy, here's why Novak Djokovic has been finding himself in hot water. There is a wide assumption that the Serbian player is unvaccinated against COVID-19. In 2020, at the height of the pandemic, he made controversial comments on vaccines in a Facebook chat with fellow Serbian tennis players. He said, "Personally, I am opposed to vaccination, and I wouldn't want to be forced by someone to take a vaccine in order to be able to travel." When the story hit headlines, he issued a response through his management team that skirted the issue. "I am keeping an open mind, and I'll continue to research on this topic because it is important and it will affect all of us," he stated. Later that year, his self-organized Adria tour was widely criticized for not taking the virus seriously, as crowds were allowed to pack into stands and players were caught partying after hours. As a result of the tour, many people caught COVID, including Djokovic and his wife. Later, in 2021, the controversy would explode. Before the Australian Open, a competition that Djokovic has won a record 9 times, it was announced it was necessary for all participants in the tournament to be vaccinated. With being widely recognized that Novak isn't vaccinated, many questioned whether he would be able to compete. However, eventually it came out that he was given exemption, with many assuming he was made exempt because of his status. People, particularly Australians, were furious. Some speculated that his exemption resulted from a second contraction of COVID within the last 6 months of his travel to Australia, which effectively rendered him immune. However, he was unwilling to give details, citing medical privacy. This left many furious. Matters were made worse for Djokovic when he arrived in Australia, as he found out that, whilst his vaccine exemption satisfied the governing body behind the tennis tournament, it wasn't enough to get him into Australia. He was sent to the Park Hotel, a hotel turned immigration detention center, as he didn't meet the country's vaccine requirements. The detention of a world-famous athlete shed some light on the Park Hotel. There are over 30 asylum seekers kept there, some of which have been there for more than 2 years. Luckily for Djokovic, he was only detained for 5 days, as he was eventually released. His visa was processed and revoked twice in the space of 10 days, which sums up just how messy the situation was. The saga ended with Djokovic being unable to play in the Australian Open, and he left the country. Ever since, Djokovic has struggled to shake the debacle. He's missed out on multiple tournaments as a result of him refusing to be vaccinated. He was unable to enter into the US Open this year, and recently missed out on the Cincinnati Masters for the same reason. This, of course, is his choice. Despite not being allowed to play in the Cincinnati Masters, Djokovic made a classy gesture to the tournament's champion, Borna Coric. The right shoulder surgery in 2021 banished Coric to the sidelines for 8 months, with the player returning to the ATP Tour in March. And he's been on the comeback trail ever since. At the Cincinnati Masters, he was finally back in the winner's circle. He won his maiden ATP 1000 title, beating Stefanos Tsitsipas in the final. This was the third in Coric's career, but the first since 2018. Despite not being allowed to enter the USA, and therefore its tournaments, due to vaccine regulations, Djokovic showed class by congratulating Coric on social media. On Instagram, he wrote, "Bravo, King. Totally deserved. All the hard work and the patience paid off. Keep going, and good luck." A nice gesture from one professional to another, especially after Coric fought back from injury. It's looking like the rules on vaccination in countries are soon to change, so perhaps it won't be long before we see Djokovic back playing regularly at every tournament. He sure is a joy to watch. But is he the greatest player of all time? Let's break down the facts. The debate as to who is the greatest tennis player of all time is a difficult one. The last 20 years have given us some incredible athletes, and undisputably some of the best of all time, like Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and of course, Novak Djokovic. All 3 of these players are far and away the most accomplished players in the sport, and incredibly, they're still playing. But who's the greatest? After beating Nick Kyrgios and winning Wimbledon in 2022, Djokovic increased his total Grand Slam titles to 21. He's won Wimbledon 7 times, tied with Pete Sampras, and only 1 behind Roger Federer. In total, Djokovic has actually won more Grand Slam than Federer, with 21 to Federer's 20. However, it's Rafael Nadal that sits with the most, 1 higher than Djokovic, with 22. The Spaniard has won Roland Garros, also known as the French Open, an astounding 14 times. He is, without question, the greatest clay tennis player that anyone has ever seen. But is he the best all around? Some would argue that he's over-reliant on one surface. He is still incredible on other surfaces, having won 6 times on hard courts, 4 US Opens and 2 Australian Opens, and twice at Wimbledon, but he does find far greater success on clay. To win Wimbledon twice is a fantastic achievement, but it pales in comparison to Djokovic and Federer's 7 and 8. In 2022, Nadal had to sadly withdraw from Wimbledon in the semi-final with an abdominal issue. The argument that Nadal is less versatile and therefore not as good as Federer and Djokovic is a valid one, although every player has a favorite surface. In comparison, Djokovic has won 7 times on grass, including 4 in a row from 2018 to 2022. 2020 was cancelled due to COVID-19. He's also won 12 times on hard courts and twice on clay. Federer, on the other hand, has won 8 times on grass, 11 times on hard courts, and only once on clay. It's clear that every player has a favored surface. Another way we can try to determine the GOAT is by looking at their ATP rankings. Currently, Nadal sits at 3rd, whilst Djokovic sits in 6th. Federer, on the other hand, currently sits outside of the ATP rankings, as he hasn't featured in any tennis tournaments over the last year. Bear in mind, he is considerably older than Nadal and Djokovic. He's 41, Nadal is 36, whereas Djokovic is 35. Perhaps a fairer way to look at it is to compare their weeks spent at number 1. Over their careers, they have spent a combined 892 weeks at the top of the rankings. Incredibly, that means that for 17 years, yes 17, one of them has been in the number 1 spot in the rankings. Individually, Nadal has spent 209 weeks at the top, Federer has spent 310, and Djokovic 373, which is incredible considering he's the youngest of the 3. There are so many ways you can compare the 3, and you could make any argument for any of them being the greatest player of all time. We'd be here all day trying to make a decision, so we're going to leave it to you to decide. One thing is clear though, they are far and away the 3 greatest players the sport has ever seen. They have 63 Grand Slams between them, the same amount as the 7 next most decorated players: Pete Sampras, John McEnroe, Andre Agassi, Bjorn Borg, Ivan Lendl, Mats Wilander, and Jimmy Connors. They really are in a league of their own. In other news, we're currently midway through the US Open. Ukraine player Marta Kostyuk made headlines when she refused to shake hands with Belarusian Victoria Azarenka. Before losing 6-2, 6-3 to Azarenka, Kostyuk says that she texted her to tell her that she would not do a customary handshake. The two opted instead to tap rackets at the net, with Kostyuk saying that shaking hands wouldn't have been the right thing to do. This is because Belarus has been a key ally of Russia in the ongoing war against Kostyuk's home nation, Ukraine. When asked about her decision, she said, "Everyone's trying to be super diplomatic about this thing. My nation is being killed daily." Azarenka has actually called for an end to the conflict, although has not explicitly denounced the war, possibly because she has had a friendly relationship in the past with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, a key ally of Vladimir Putin. Sadly, that's all we've got time for. What do you make of the controversy surrounding Novak Djokovic? Do you think he's the greatest tennis player of all time? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, smash the like button. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.